Hi, classmates. This week I will be going over approaches to emergency management and public safety. I would like to apologize in advance as I have a cold, so if you hear me sniffling, please just ignore it. First, I will be discussing the GovLove podcast over responding to Hurricane Irma. During this podcast, I was introduced to Mr. Dan Biles. Dan is the county manager of Pasco County, Florida, and Pasco County is just northwest of Tampa. His motto, and also his county's motto, as well as the Emergency Operations Center, is they like to plan for the worst but hope for the best. Preparation started early on Labor Day, and I believe that was approximately about a week, maybe a week and a half before the storm hit. He wanted to make sure communication was concise with every department within the EOC, and he also held 2 briefings per day with all personnel, all employees, just to make sure their plan was aligned. I found it very interesting about shelters within Florida. Historically, the shelters within Pasco County do not fill up as the residents do not enjoy going to the shelters. However, the EOC still plans and prepares for people to come. The Emergency Operations Center removed all emergency personnel off the streets when the wind exceeded 45 miles per hour. However, all firefighters were present at their respective station as the EOC would need them if a rescue took place. It was also very good to know that all the firefighters were present, and let's say certain firefighters went out for rescues. Since every firefighter was present, this would allow for the other firefighters that needed rest to take that rest. After the storm had passed, 99% of Pasco County had power by the end of the week. However, I would like to make a point about their elderly and special needs community. It took about a week for all the power to come back on within their county. It was especially crucial for Dan to get the power back on for their elderly and special needs community. Typically, those 2 communities have equipment that each individual would need. In order for that equipment to work, they would need power. So Dan made it a point to get that power restored for those communities, for those homes, for those individuals. The community played a major role in the rebuilding process. They also stepped up at a time of need. Dan praised a county clerk of Pasco County. And just so you know, a county clerk is an elected official, so they are a part of the government. This employee ran one of the shelters, and Dan had much praise for this individual as they took time out of their life to run this shelter, and he just thought that was so great. Social media communication played a huge role during the time of the storm. Approximately 15 Twitter and Facebook accounts that are affiliated with the county were up and running. Each account was linked and updates were sent out at the same time. Dan found this to be very helpful. That way information could go all out at once. There would not be any misleading stories. There wouldn't be untrue stories. He just wanted to make sure that the general public was getting truthful information. And also what is very helpful about linking social media accounts is each individual typically will follow one certain account within not within a county, but within a government body. So with each account, you'll have a different audience. And by linking the accounts, you'll address multiple audiences. And that is just very, very helpful for any EOC, any government. Also, Dan had mentioned that before or prior to the storm, him and his team created an app. What this app essentially did is it allowed citizens, the general public, to make reports within this app. One, this would notify Dan and his team of any damages within their county. Two, the damages that were reported by the citizens, they could print off those reports to supply those reports to their respective insurance adjuster. And Dan received positive feedback from this, as it was helpful for the community, but it was also helpful for the citizens. I think that's all I have on that. And just one last point, I made a note of the stories that Dan hears during the time of need really motivates him to provide the best relief, the best care for the citizens of Pasco County. Next is the article on disaster and emergency management systems in urban areas. How public service is delivered today has changed over the course of time. It's pretty reasonably stated as we're constantly learning, constantly evolving how to do better for our cities, for just the general public. Governance is the management of networks that are formed and maintained to solve complex problems. Moreover, governance networks must work together to reach goals. So networks, this could be local, state, federal government, your nonprofits, your shelters, anything that helps in relief efforts for natural disasters. Effective disaster management at all levels of government can be possible through implementation of governance elements, including predictability, participation, and transparency. I believe that transparency is huge. As long as you're being transparent, being open with the public, reporting truthful stuff, I think relief will go a lot more smoothly. Emergency management is historically collaborative. Collaborative meaning communication. You have to talk, you have to work together in order to provide the best care. The FRP, NRP, and NRF were documents establishing specific standards for state and local governments to follow during a natural disaster. I believe a lot of these documents, essentially more so, sorry, just lost my train of thought. But after Hurricane Katrina arose, Hurricane Katrina is a prime example of what not to do during a time of a natural disaster. One could say that communication between local, state, the nonprofits, and our federal government was lacking. Due to the lack of communication, relief efforts were not happening. Citizens had to step up in order to relieve people from flooded homes, in order to provide food, and things of that nature. State governments are required to look over and provide guidance to county and local governments during natural disasters. Further, when the state government has exhausted their resources, the federal government is required to step in to provide relief. So, for example, if you have let's say a food shelter that is providing food after a hurricane, tornado, whatever it may be, and the shelter is running out of food, that is when the federal government has to step in and start providing the food for those affected by the natural disaster. And that is just one of the many examples. The next article is improving emergency service in rural areas. I currently am living in a very rural area in Texas. The biggest city within the county that I live in has 9,000 people, so I found this article to be very interesting. Emergency medical service, EMS, are the first line of response to urgent health care needs within a community. So if you don't know what EMS is, it's your ambulance. Rural communities suffer from inadequate emergency services, including emergency care. To determine EMS performance, you must consider the quality of the care provided and the timeliness the care is provided, so the response time. I found it very fascinating that urban areas, their response time to 90% of the calls that were made is 8 minutes and 59 seconds. However, response time for rural areas is 14 minutes and 59 seconds. So 6 difference, it may not sound like a lot, but that is huge, especially in life-threatening situations. It could be the matter of life and death. They also provided 3 bioobjective models to locate EMS ambulances. So the models essentially gathered information to produce response time. So from the time that it was called, where the ambulance was placed, to where the incident was, they conducted this research to determine the time. So the information that I gathered and questions that I have just for myself, community involvement during, before, after natural disasters plays a huge role in relief efforts. Leading social media accounts can help get word out to the public in an efficient manner. Communication amongst all levels of government is vital during natural disasters, and how rural areas station their EMS ambulances could be the deciding factor between life and death. I was just curious of these 2 questions. How often does social media hurt EOCs during a natural disaster? For example, if they provide untruthful information, will citizens be more willing to help during relief, or will they just sit back and not do anything to help? Does EMS in rural areas receive complaints often due to response time? And I apologize, I misspelled due. And my 2 questions for you guys is, put yourself in Dan's shoes. How would you adequately prepare for a natural disaster? Do you believe a week of planning is enough? Please explain. From the reading, we learned that the response time for EMS in rural areas is 14 minutes and 59 seconds. How would you place EMS in rural areas in order to reduce the response time? Thank you guys so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your semester.